Wow, we have a lot of lovely people. Um, Hi, everyone. We're going to wait just a couple more minutes to let people in, but we're so glad that you're here today with us to learn about Jewish magic in Greece and Ashkenaz, specifically Ottoman Greece. We're joined today by Dr. Devin Enar, who is the Isaac Al-Hadef Professor in Sephardic Studies at the University of Washington and a general scholar of Ladino and the history of Ottoman Jewry, especially in Salonika, as well as Olivia Dvora-Tucker, who is a Jewish demonologist and Talmud educator. They've been published in Kendon Alfon's Feeding Women of the Talmud, Feeding Ourselves. They serve as program coordinator for Sfara, which is a traditionally radical yeshiva, and put the femme in ephemera and the trans in translation. Both of our presenters today will give a short presentation, and then we will get into a Q&A session. Please feel free to share questions you have in the chat, and I will try to incorporate them into the Q&A part of this event. Thank you all so much for joining us today. This event is co-hosted by Hey Alma and My Jewish Learning. So I'm so happy to see both of our audiences coming together. And without further ado, Olivia will be our first presenter. So we look forward to learning with you.
Boker Tov, Shavua Tov, wherever you are, thank you so much for joining us today to learn about Jewish magic. The magic is in the air. I see somebody has an evil eye amulet coffee mug on the screen. Hello. It is an honor to be speaking here about one of my greatest passions, which is the quest to remystify Judaism. We spent a lot of time moving into a very rational way of thinking, and I think the time is right to bring back our demons and our magic, and you are all a part of this journey. As was said, I'm Olivia Dvora, pronouns they, them, and I would like to start today with a story. This story comes from Posen, which was in Prussia. And I learned this story from a book called Lilith's Cave, Jewish Tales of the Supernatural, collected by Howard Schwartz, who's a fabulous folklorist, who tells a story called The Cellar. So there was once a goldsmith, and he's riding through the woods, and it's dark, and it's getting darker, and he decides to keep on pressing, and he gets lost in the dark woods, and gets lost in the world of the demons. His horse suddenly reveals that it is not a horse, and in fact is a demon, and says, I will lead you back to your home if you promise to marry my daughter. Well, what choice does he have? And he marries this demon daughter, although he is already married and has human wife and children. Comes back home and finds that in his workroom, his goldsmith basement, is his new demon bride. And his workshop has been transformed into a marvelous palace. Now, over time, although it's a marriage of some necessity, he falls in love with his demon bride and starts spending much time with her. No one knows because he is doing this relationship in his secret gold area where no one comes into my shop, my jewelry shop. And in time, he has children with his demon spouse. On Passover at the Seder, when he hears her call, he gets up from the Seder and goes down, and his wife this time follows and sees through the keyhole what's really going on. She tells the rabbi, and the rabbi forces him to wear an amulet to ward off this demon. And from that day, his heart is broken. Eventually, on his deathbed, his demon children, his half-human, half-demon children, and his demon wife come to him and say, we have no home. My children are between humans and between demons. Where will they live? And he says, you may have the cellar as your inheritance. It's sealed off, and many generations later, this is forgotten, and people try to move into the house. Now, of course, this house goes through your classic haunted house things. Things are breaking, screams, apparitions, all of these sort of things. They call a rabbi, and the rabbi finds the old journal of the rabbi who had given the amulet. And they say, that's a demon house. There are demons living there. And they go in and they get the demons and they say, come to court. We got to settle this. There's a human inheritance line and a demon inheritance line, and they go to court together. Now, how do you think this court case is going to go? You all have chat access. Do you think the court will rule in favor of the human inheritance line or the demons who were willed the basement? I'm seeing they can split the difference. I'm seeing the demons who willed the basement, probably the demons in favor of both. Demons because of the mother's line. Fascinating. A will is a will. 50-50. Ah, I love your imagination. And no, they will discriminate against us. The answer is that the story goes in whatever way you need it to. Howard Schwartz ends up telling this where the demons are ruled against. The court says, you were only given the basement, but you've haunted the whole house. You all need to get out of here and go to the wilderness. But Martin Buber, yes, the Martin Buber, the great theologian, the I and Thou theologian, wrote a book of demon and angel stories where he changes the ending. And he says the court understands the difficult position these demons are in, being between worlds, and gives them the whole house. I love this story because it gives us an insight into demons as a living part of the world. It gives an opportunity for demons to not just be a menace, but to be love and to be family, and to think about our supernatural relations as more than something that should be shunned, but something that might have a really wonderful impact on our life. Something that was respected by the court even, as well as understood to be potentially threatening to a family as much as it could be the way that a family is born. I have for you a lush Google Doc where you have the Howard Schwartz telling in a short form, as well as the Lilith's Cave, and a link to the Martin Buber version as well. And I would like to hop back to a part of that story about amulets and share with you an amulet from Poland from around 1900. So you understand maybe what kind of amulet we might imagine. So this was a popular style, which was paper cut. Now, paper around this time had become much more affordable, and so was clearly the choice for somebody who didn't have a lot of resources. It's depicted here. You have these lions around this text. This is Psalm 121. I lift my eyes to the mountains. Where will my help come? Where will my help come from? And below goes immediately into warding off Lilith. And so if you're looking for a way to say, I don't like that whole demon story. I think my spouse is with a demon, or I think I'm with a demon or something, and I need to get them away. This is not the way that our relationship is going to go. Here's a good one for you. Okay. Adam and Chava, that's Eve, inside. Lilith and all of her strength and power, her koach, outside. I come from the children of Yosef, and in his name, the rule of the evil eye, the Ayin Hara, will have no power over me. Amen. Really beautiful script here. Can get closer again. Yes. The Yosef the Dreamer, mentioned Julianne in the chat, is blessed in this way of being a well on his father's deathbed. And this turns into this thing about water and the evil eye not being able to penetrate water. And so if you tell demons you're from the line of Joseph, it can really prevent their attack. There's more here on amulets for you to go through later. I've heard that this is a crew. Somebody has this text highlighted, and I would love if you didn't. Thank you. Okay, fabulous. For you to explore as well. I'm only giving a short summary here. The program will be that I'm speaking, and then Dr. Devin Nar will speak as well, and then we'll have some time for Q&A. And I'd like to present another separate tradition. Oh no, have I given somebody the ability to edit this? Hold on. Please make no changes on this document. View, done. Okay, thank you for your patience. Yes, I'm seeing Demon Family. You're treading on some serious crap in the chat. And I want to lift up that as much as I love our demon traditions, you don't need to feel the same way. You can believe that it's all made up stories. And certainly many Jews have throughout our history. And if you find that they are a tradition that resonates with you, I invite you to explore how they could live in your life today. Okay. Um, Another fabulous practice is in the world of women uh, making of soul candles. This was a practice where women would take thread to the graveyard, especially right around the high holidays. So you've missed your timing, but you can do it again next year, and measure out the graves of loved ones, or measure out the entire graveyard, and then bring that thread, which is now a candle wick, back to the synagogue and back to people who were very good at making candles, and they would make these candles for the souls of the people whose graves were measured. And you would call on these souls to support you in the year. So this is a techina, a woman's prayer, usually written in Yiddish. That's I have the translation here from a book called The Hebrew Priestess by Jill Hammer. This is the Kohenet's book, which is fabulous. They said, Rabbeinu Shel Olam, Master of the world, I ask you, merciful God, to accept my mitzvah. And note that they say a mitzvah of making these candles, which is that a mitzvah in the Torah? Not that I've seen. But they know it is. They feel that it's a commandment for them to do this practice, to do this kind of magic. For the sake of your holy name and for the sake of the holy souls, may we have the merit of donating candles to the holy temple, as was done in ancient times. May the candles that are made for the sake of the pure and holy souls cause them to awaken and inform each other until they reach the souls of the holy matriarchs and patriarchs. And may those protect us. I feel often that there isn't a good time to call on ancestors in Jewish practice. We invite our Ushpizin at Sukkot, but don't do much of it throughout the year. And it's very exciting for me to find this moment. I'll conclude by talking about the question, where have all the demons gone? Which you might sing to the tune of where have all the flowers gone? And the answer is gone to Haskalah, Jewish enlightenment, which was started around 1770s and into the 1880s into the Reform movement. And it was a time of moving away from magic and into rationality. Often this modernist turn to try to assimilate with the peoples around. Assimilation doesn't afford the protection that it pretends to. Just a warning for you. And so I've included a couple polemics here. One, for example, Our rabble say a demon injured them. They were injured, but they themselves are the demons and injurers because of the great filth that always lies near their homes. Because it comes wet from rain, and it goes out in the sun, and with it flies, millions of them every minute in the air. The sick children look at them and yawn, and in short, the father, the mother, the servant all yawn, and the women say, "Look, I told you the child has the evil eye. Whoa, whoa." And so, in the pursuit of teaching about medicine and assimilation, we lost a lot of our supernatural traditions. I'm seeing there's often a question of, were demons just germs? I think our first story shows that demons could not all be chalked up to germs, but maybe the demons that were germs got understood that way. And there are demons left that aren't. I'll wrap up and pass to Dr. Nar with one final story. The rabbi of Kotsk was once asked, the great sage Maimonides said that demons didn't exist and that magic wasn't real. And yet, Rashi talks about demons in his commentary. Later rabbis after Maimonides said they were real. What's the deal? And the Rebbe of Kotsk said, they're both right. Elu v'elu, these and these are true. In fact, demons did used to exist, but the Torah of Maimonides was so powerful that when Maimonides said that demons didn't exist, they vanished. They all had to pack up and leave. Now, we have great Torah as well. If you know that demons are real, if you know that magic works, you too can say that it does, and it will be invited back from its exile. Thank you.
Olivia, thank you so much for teaching us a bit about different magical traditions in Ashkenaz and specific texts relied upon in Ashkenaz. I'm trying to replace Devin as, there you are. Okay, spotlighted. And Dr. Nar, we really look forward to hearing from you. And thank you for incorporating the graphic into your presentation.
Sure. Thank you very much. Thank you for the opportunity. It's good to share the virtual screen with Olivia today, and thank you for that introduction into the world of Eastern European Jewish magic traditions. I want to provide you with some insight into another angle and aspect of Jewish magical traditions that bring us into the Mediterranean world, really in modern times. But that tradition and the antecedents to which Olivia was also referring go back really to ancient times. And many of the things that we might associate with Judaism today, the symbols that we might associate with Judaism, including, for example, the Star of David, were among the magical symbols that once existed all throughout the Mediterranean world. Different kinds of stars. They were all essentially magical and protective symbols. And you can see here an incantation bowl or magic bowl from the Babylonian era, written in Aramaic. And you get in the sense from these kinds of earthenware artifacts, of which there's a really robust and fascinating literature, just the centrality of magical traditions going back until ancient times that were shared among Jews, Christians, pagans, Muslims, a variety of different communities. The realm of magic was a realm that crossed divides between different communities. Olivia concluded her remarks by referring to the impact of the Haskalah, of the Jewish Enlightenment. And one of the things that the Jewish Enlightenment tried to do was to separate out like true religion from magic. And in a certain sense, historically, those two concepts and categories were not so easy to disentangle. And certainly in the Sephardic world, and certainly in a context that was prior to the Haskalah or that resisted the Haskalah, those differentiations and distinctions were not really applicable. So much so that, some people might say, well, if you're going to throw out what you want to call magic practices or superstitions, you're throwing out Judaism itself. And so in our contemporary lens, our post-Enlightenment, our 21st century rationalist lens, we may like to dismiss magical practices or the realm of the irrational as below us or beyond us. But I want to bring you back to a world in which what we might consider magical thinking today was integral to the worldview of the societies of the Eastern Mediterranean. And I want to do that through the prism of Sephardic Jews. And just to orient us here, 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue, the dispossession and conquest of the indigenous peoples of America began, and also the important Jewish community from the Iberian Peninsula was expelled. And they took a variety of different routes, but one of the dominant routes that they took was traversing the Mediterranean world and settling in what was then the Ottoman Empire, a Muslim society, which is represented here in the yellow. And they established important communities all across the Eastern Mediterranean. Salonika, which is where my family wound up settling, Istanbul, the imperial capital, Izmir, Jerusalem, other places, a variety of places that were united within the framework of the Ottoman Empire and united through their connections to their Christian and Muslim neighbors in the various locations in which they resided. The customs and practices related to Jewish magical traditions, related to defending against the Ein Hara, against the evil eye, or against the Shadim, for example, which are demons. There are a variety of different figures like this in the framework of mysticism and magic, and the practices and customs of how to deal with and defend oneself against these figures was transmitted across the generations. And one of the vectors of that transmission was in the practice of Kabbalah, in the practice of Jewish mysticism. And there's a huge literature here, and there are many different differentiations and different threads. And unfortunately, we don't have the time to get into all of those. I want to enter into one tiny little snippet there that relates to how I encountered magical practices, which is through my own family, and essentially in the realm of Kabbalah Ma'asit, practical Kabbalah, or magic, you might say. And the practitioner with whom I became most familiar from childhood, although I never met him, was my great-grandfather, Hacham, or Rabbi, Benjamin Chaim Nar, who was a rabbi in Salonika, in the Ottoman Empire, and subsequently in Greece, and later in the United States, in Harlem, in New York City, and then in New Brunswick, New Jersey, where many years later, I was born. So as a practicing Hacham, as a rabbi, my great-grandfather was imbued and embedded in a variety of different Jewish textual traditions. And as I think Olivia sort of alluded to, in the realm of Jewish ritual practice, there are distinct practices that tend to be associated based on gender identity. So there's a whole realm of practices that tend to be associated with women. There is a whole realm that tend to be associated with men. And one of the realms in which my great-grandfather became involved was in the realm of creating written texts, protective amulets known as kemeot. And here is a photograph of actually one of the kameyas that my great-grandfather created. And this is a kemeya that he created for his nephew. And I think some of that, maybe even saw some of the family, some of these cousins are here on the Cohen clan is here, which is very exciting. The story goes that when Hacham Nar's nephew had to go to World War II, this is in the United States, the military service, Rabbi Nar created this kemeya, a protective amulet for him. And the story goes that this was one of the reasons why he survived the various deployments that he had during World War II, when not everyone else in his battalion did survive. Now, a kemeya, something like this, would include a parchment that would be folded up kind of like into a little, paper football, and you might wear it on your person, as was the expectation here. It's got a, kind of a lanyard thing going on. Others might stick it in their pocket or elsewhere into their clothes, maybe sew it in to a jacket. a variety of different ways here, and it might be something that would be given to you on a special occasion when you're in need of extra protection, or it may be something that is given to you when you are born as a baby, like the first thing that you're given, something that would be under your pillow or affixed to your crib, with a variety of other practices that go with this, different kinds of protective practices to defend against the shadim and against, which are we say in English, the demons, and against the Ain Hara, the evil eye, or as it was known in Ladino, el ojo malo, the evil eye. And the evil eye is something that you can bring upon your community environment, people with whom you are interacting. You can do it intentionally. You can cast the evil eye upon someone, but you can also maybe invite the evil eye or invite shadim if you are intemperate with your compliments. And so anytime you give a compliment, especially to a baby, say, you have to, in order to ward off the evil eye, there has to be something else that has to be done, because a compliment may invite the attacks and the aggression of the shadim, the dañadores, or of the Ain Hara. And so, you say, what a pretty baby you have. And in the Sephardic custom, when you say that, if you do not say mashallah, mashallah afterwards, which is Arabic, by the way, and was completely embedded into the Ladino-speaking Sephardic communities of the Ottoman Empire, if you do not say mashallah, mashallah afterwards, in some practices, some cultures, you spit. Maybe you're familiar with poo, poo, poo. This is also you're trying to cast away the evil eye. So if you don't say mashallah, mashallah, you didn't invoke the necessary defenses, and you leave that baby open to being besieged by the evil eye or the shadim. Now, what is inside of this kemeah? What is the text? Now, the text draws on a variety of different ancient textual traditions that go back to the Talmud in some instances. They go back also to the Zohar and to Kabbalistic practices, but oftentimes what these kemeahs, what these talismans involve, are a variety of invocations of the name of God, a variety of special names of God. They also involved invocation, oftentimes, of the name of angels. Now, in this instance, we're not going to get into all of this, but I want to point out a couple of key features for you, which is, first of all, you might be familiar with this kind of a symbol here. This is like a hamsa, a protective hand, or the hand of Fatima. It's, again, a symbol that is shared between Jews and Muslims and other societies of the Mediterranean world. And if you look at here down below, you can see the some of the invocations here, right? So it's written for the name of Mordechai Bar Miru, which was Mordechai, son of Miriam. Miru, right here, and it is against protection right here against, do you see what this is? The Ain Hara, the evil eye, okay? And so this gives you a sense of the protective function that this kind of amulet would play. Now, I should mention that the creation of kemeahs like this by figures like my great-grandfather Chacham Nar, like the incantation bowls from over 1,000 years ago, even if they were produced by Jewish people and used Hebrew or Aramaic and referred to Jewish textual traditions, they were sometimes the customers and the clients included non-Jews. And so again, this gives you a sense of the ecumenical approach of protective traditions in the Eastern Mediterranean world. And from oral history, I know that one of the things that Chacham ben Yamin did, and again, this is him, you can see him in his Ottoman Turkish fez there. One of the ways that he in part made a living in Salonika before he came to the United States was he made protective amulets for farmers who came from the countryside, principally Muslim, possibly also Christian farmers, to get special blessings of protection so that they would have successful crops and a successful harvest for the year. So the communities relied on each other in the realm of spirituality and in the realm of protection. Now, I want to give you one final example, and then I will wrap up in terms of the realm of Kabbalah Ma'asit, of practical magic and folk remedies. And here I bring you an example from my great-grandfather's notebook, his manuscript. So, which is an unpublished manuscript, so you get a little special sneak peek of it here. This is in his own pen, in his own handwriting, but he didn't make this up, but it's drawn on larger practices that were operative throughout the Ottoman domain. And this language here is Ladino or Judeo-Spanish, written traditionally as it was in Hebrew letters. So, right, so this says, para uno que está jazino, saber que jazino es. So this is to discover what the origin of someone who is sick, what the source of that sickness is. And how do you discover the sickness that is afflicting the person who is sick? You have to do essentially a magical mathematical calculation, invoking the practices of numerology, the practices of gematria. So what you have to do is, as it says here, I bring you here in the English, you have to assume el nombre del jazino y nombre de la madre y aparta. So you have to sum the name of the patient and the name of the mother and then divide, and you do little mathematical calculations. So the way that the gematria works, and here you can see, here is a page from the inside cover of my great-grandfather's notebook, where he is counting out the gematria of the names of his customers, right, which is really fascinating, of his patients. And so, right, so how does the gematria work? Each Hebrew letter has a numerical value. So the first letter of the Hebrew alphabet is Aleph. The second letter is, which has numerical value of 1. The second letter is Bet, which has numerical value of 2, et cetera, et cetera. So when you write out somebody's name in the Hebrew alphabet, then you figure out the gematria of their name, the gematria of the mother's name. You do this mathematical calculation, and this is how you begin to determine what the cause of the illness is. So, if the remainder, si quedó uno, está jazino de ainara. So if the remainder is 1, that is because the person is sick from the ainara, from the evil eye. And then it goes through and tells you all the different possibilities to explain the illness, okay? So you can see the logic that is at place here, right? So this is kind of a realm, we would say, of mystical, you might say in the derogatory language ways, this is like superstitious stuff. But this was a way to make sense of a world that otherwise wasn't so readily explainable. And it was a way of making sense and getting a sense of an approach to how to manage in that environment. So I don't have the translation here for you, but what the second paragraph goes on to demonstrate is what you're supposed to do once you find out what the cause of your illness is. Okay, so I'll give you just the first example, which again is the Ain Hara, the evil eye. So it says, para Ain Hara, que toma un poco de tierra de beta kavurot, y que la eche de dentro de un poco de agua y la esparce en 4 partes de la casa. So, what does that mean? If it turns out that the cause is evil eye, is the Ain Hara, is the evil eye, what is one supposed to do in order to heal oneself, protect the one who is afflicted by the evil eye? You should take some earth from the Beta Kavurot, from the cemetery, and you should put it in some water, and you should mix it up, and then you should sprinkle that water in the 4 corners of the home of the afflicted person, and that would be one of the ways to begin to address the affliction of the Ain Hara. And it goes through to explain the different practices that one should undertake in order to resolve the illness that was produced by these various kind of dañadores, these various kinds of elements that were lurking in the society and in the natural environment, and especially could be inflicted upon you by your fellow humans in that social environment. So it involves using resin and myrtle and henna, vinegar. I'm just looking at the list here. Some things you have to drink, some things you have to put under your bed, some things you have to put in different parts of your house. And these would be practices that were believed to support those who were ill and to provide them with a path forward and a way out. Now, it was not only the Enlightenment that led to the dissolution largely of this way of thinking, although I would say that this way of thinking didn't so much go away, rather the expertise and the knowledge of how to treat these ailments, which was transmitted from teacher to pupil in both written and oral form across the generations. In my family, it ended with my great-grandfather, and I do not know anybody who makes in today's world a kemaya in this Ottoman Jewish tradition, which is an extinct tradition. But other reasons, in Seattle, for example, where I am now, the leading rabbinical figure, his son, wrote that we don't have to worry about the shadim, we don't have to worry about the demons, because as far as Seattle is concerned, we shouldn't worry because these shadim didn't cross the Atlantic Ocean. So I don't know how landlocked and continentally based the shadim were, but certainly in my family they did not disappear across the Atlantic Ocean. And in fact, these are three kemayot from Rabbi Maimon in Seattle, from his own personal collection. So let's say maybe the shadim didn't make it to Seattle, but at least the protections against them did make it to Seattle and continued to play an important role in developing the Sephardic culture in Seattle, which, by the way, is one of the most important centers of Sephardic Jewish culture, in which there were a number of important, especially female women healers who had their own practices and customs using herbs and using incantations, using Ladino, using Hebrew, and using Aramaic. And so with that, I'd like to conclude, and I'd invite folks, if they're interested, to learn a little bit more, to check out a program that we put together on the Sephardic Studies website at the University of Washington, Exploring Sephardic Life Cycle Customs, a digital exhibition that includes a discussion of the Kemaya and its use in birthing rituals. I'd also invite folks to check out this book on ritual medical lore of Sephardic women by Isaac Jack Levy, who himself was from Rhodes and recently passed away, and his spouse, which is a wonderful introduction, especially to the women's practices. And then finally, to check out Michael Molcho's Traditions and Customs of the Sephardic Jews of Salonika. He was a rabbi in Salonika. The original manuscript was written on the eve of World War II and completed while Michael Molcho was in hiding in the mountains in Greece. And it was subsequently published in Spanish in 1950 and then in English in 2006. And if you check that book out, you'll be able to see a reproduction of some of my great-grandfather's Kabbalistic manuscript and a little bit more interpretation there. So thank you for the opportunity to share a little bit. And we've really only just grazed the surface here. So I look forward to thoughts, questions, and conversation. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm gonna spotlight Olivia again and ask you a combination of questions, some of which I prepared in advance and some of which have been asked in the chat. I also kind of want to mention that my dad's family are Muslims from the Balkans and my mom's side are Ashkenazi Jews. And it was such a pleasure in the process of reading the resources you have both contributed to in the past and seeing so much of my dad's Muslim culture, from the mashallah to the triangular amulets with scripture inside, being reflected across different ethnic and religious groups within the Balkans. So I think that my first question will actually be something really lovely that I saw in the chat, which is, what's the difference, in your opinion, between a prayer and a spell?
What's the difference between a prayer and a spell? Fabulous. I want to lift up a thread that I've been seeing in the chat, which is the idea that what the establishment does is religion, and what anyone on the fringe does is magic. Especially if those people on the fringe are women, gender variant people, the queers, like the people who do not give uh, all of the respect that the establishment wants, they get called magic users. That's a spell. That's not proper Judaism. Uh, so I'm not sure there is much of a difference. I think certain of our prayers feel very much like spells, like the Hashkivenu, which entreats God to protect us through the night, like doing a really specific thing. Um, but yes, this is a thread that I really appreciated seeing in the chat. What do you think, Doctor?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. In the scholarship, there are different interpretations. So one of the well-known scholars of Jewish mysticism, Kabbalah, Moshe Idel, who's an Israeli, he basically says there's no difference between magic and religion other than the power dynamics that separate them out from each other. And, in terms of the rabbinic leadership and Jewish communal leadership, we'll want to make distinctions and differentiations, which is about trying to promote both a power dynamic of like who is in charge, and also an effort to try to make Jewish practices and customs suitable for the broader kind of environment, and to not provoke the non-Jewish environment to cast aspersions upon Jews and Jewish practices. So trying to do things that will be perceived to be respectable in the eyes of the general Jewish society. And so, there's a lot of literature on this. You alluded to it already in terms of Maimonides and Rashi and the dispute that they had. The most fascinating thing I would say is that despite all of the efforts on the part of rabbis and established rabbinic Jewish authorities to limit and mitigate the uses of what they would describe as superstition or magic, those practices really never fully went away. And I'll give you one final example of thinking about the relationship between a blessing and a spell or magic and prayer. Is, when I was growing up, my great-grandfather, my great-grandfather, the rabbi, his son, my nono, was also born in Salonika. He taught me the following thing, which is we had a custom where we would speak on Friday evenings to wish each other Shabbat Shalom. And at a certain point, I asked him to speak to me in Ladino when I was about 18, 19 years old, and we would begin to have conversations in Ladino. And the way that we would end the conversation, he would say "Nochara buena," which means good night. Now, what is the response to good night? In the Sephardic custom that I became familiar to me from Salonika, the response to good night is Amen. Now you think about it, very interesting. Now it says, well, because you are actually wishing, this is a blessing. It is a blessing. You are wishing someone, may the powers that be grant you a good night, a nochara buena. And in Ladino, there's noche and nochara. And the way that I like to think about the difference, noche is the night. The night is begun and the night ends, but the nochada is the duration of the evening. Now it's may you have a nochada buena, may the entirety of your night, your sleep and your dreams until you rise in the morning. May that all be good. And the response, therefore, is Amen.
Amen.
Thank you so much. And on that topic, I think something else coming up for people in the chat is, did rabbinic opinions on the use of folk magic differ from how these practices existed in reality? How did individuals relate to these practices?
Sometimes it's very hard to know how individuals responded. That's why I'm marveling, Dr. Nar, that you have this volume that is in your family that shows you like the show your work element of doing the magic. That's like such an important piece of evidence, because I do most of my research in Talmud, where it's very easy to say, oh, they didn't really do that. That's just a metaphor. Or like somebody said that they did that. There's a claim in Talmud that the majority of women knew magic or were witches or were engaged in witchcraft in some way. And people are like, nah, they were just slandering. And maybe they are being misogynistic, but maybe it's true too. And so these artifacts are so wonderful. That's why I give so much credence to folklore, to the folk tales, which are usually not from the establishment, but are from the family passing them down. And to me, gives that hint of this is what's going on and really going on.
I would just add one thought. If you think about the origin of the figure of the Shadim, for example, the demons, or in Ladino, sometimes they were called, the Dañadores, which are central characters in the framework of Jewish magical practices. They are discussed in Mishnah, in Avot, and it is said that they are created on Shabbat Eve at dusk. This is their origin, right? And so there are tons of references to the Shadim all throughout the literature in the Midrash and in the Talmud, and they have names, and they're given names: Bilar and Samael, Ashmedai, and Lilith, of course, to whom you referred, and Keteb and Agrat Bat Machlat.
Oh, she's my favorite. She's my favorite. Yeah. I commissioned a piece for her.
Oh, great. So the thing is that as much as the rabbis, oh wow.
This is by the artist Yotzeret Shedim, the creatress of demons. If you find her Bandcamp, you can listen to a piece of harsh noise music that was recorded as a contact microphone on her.
That's amazing.
So she goes out with 180,000 angels. She's a demon queen who goes out with angels.
That's amazing. All this is to say that as much as rabbis would try to repress or extrude the Shadim and these magical traditions from normative Judaism, they are embedded there from the beginning. I mean, they are part of the literature, they are part of the discourse, and there's an uncomfortable kind of dynamic, clearly, that's at play, but they are present in the literature from the very beginning.
I'm also kind of curious about the relationship between the producers of the amulets and the people utilizing them. I think that the idea of the divide between the big religion and the little religion is a little bit more ambiguous, because I think, Dr. Nar, in your case, you were kind of touching on the fact that the Chacham had to write. Is the Chacham like part of writing the blessing that goes inside of an amulet?
Yeah, I mean, in this custom, yes, the Chacham would be, the rabbi would be the one who would be inscribing the text in the amulet. Yes, that is correct. Yes. So
I think that my next question is, I mean, from ritual medical lore of Sephardic women, we kind of know that Jews did sometimes consult non-Jews for magical assistance in the case of going to Muslim women and, learning or having a practice done to them. I'm curious about whether either of you know about non-Jews consulting Jews for magical help and what the relationship between Jewish magic and their non-Jewish neighbors was.
Do you have a particular story?
Yeah, I could comment on that. I mean, just briefly to say that, in the realm of folk practice, in the little religion, to use your term, in the realm of magical practices, in the realm of music, in the realm of food, these were realms that were shared across cultures and across communities. So, for example, in Salonika, as I alluded to, my great-grandfather had non-Jewish customers solicit protective amulets because a spiritual man, a spiritual person, or someone who is perceived to have a special power, that was not limited to their own community. So miracle workers, let's say, or magical figures would be perceived as such across religious divides. And that also was reflected in the broader religious space. So one of the old churches of the patron saint of Salonika, the St. Demetrius Church, the keepers of that church and the crypt down below during Ottoman times were Muslims. And Muslims would go and they would light candles there, and Christians would go and they would light candles there. This was a kind of a patron saint of the city, and there was sort of this kind of the interconnection of the different religious practices that was a normative feature of these kinds of societies at the time, a feature that maybe we've lost in some sense.
I love that mutual respect, that recognizing, you're tapped in. Like your faith has brought you to this way of being tapped into the supernatural. Ours has brought us here. These do not, even if they are different paths that work very differently, they don't mean that the other one's wrong. They mean that it's right for you, and we can respect that and help each other. Your question, Mira, reminded me of the way that I'll see symbols from Kabbalah used in tarot in ways that feel so separated from their Jewish context, or how I'll see demons like Lilith or Agrat like brought into modern witchy contexts that are just lacking their Jewish lore to them, and how much I wish that we loved our demons enough that people knew what the narrative was. So now you all have been empowered to start learning these things and sharing the legend again. But people like our demons, people like them. They're
I see a question in the chat, two of them, which is, within Jewish communities themselves, how much did we see other people within the same community shun or speak badly about those who engaged in these magical practices? Or was it more you had kind of a resident medicine woman, or kind of like, someone you knew did it and you just went to them, or you didn't?
Yeah, that the section on Haskalah that's in the packet that I linked to and was sharing from has that polemic, that diatribe against people who were practicing. That was from Moses Marcus. And he was coming at it from this direction of, I'm trying to save your life by teaching you what medicine really is. Which I'm going to say that's generally pretty good. He's like, vaccines are good, right? It was pre-vaccines, but this is if you're looking for a modern thing to connect to. And in the process, these people who were pushing for medicine were definitely called heretics, because as Devin was saying, the relationship between superstition and religion was real entwined in a way that if you were going to say, nah, this superstition is just whatever, you can throw it out, you're saying you can throw out religion.
Mm-hmm.
So they were often labeled heretics and shunned for promoting this idea that superstitions were dangerous. But eventually they went out, such that it's actually very rare that you have these conversations where we're talking about Jewish magic, and now it's the people who are promoting the Jewish magic who are a little bit called, who are you? That's not Judaism. That's what we used to do. That's fake. So how the tables can always turn. It's a great cycle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would just to add on that, I think that it's a continuous kind of back and forth in terms of which practices are legitimized by whom and when. And in the Ottoman Jewish world, there was a push to distinguish between the Chachamim, who are Geonim, the learned ones, the real learned ones, and then what sometimes they called Chachamikos, the little rabbis, who were the ones who were dealing with the kamayas and the magical stuff. But the thing is that the people, that the Chachamikos, if we can accept that term, they continued to have a role to play because the people wanted it. The people sought it. They wanted it part of their lives. And, one of the most fascinating letters that I have from our family archive is a letter written after World War II, by a family friend who survived the Nazi occupation of Salonika in hiding. And after the war, he writes to my family explaining what happened to the part of the family that remained behind, and they had all been murdered at Auschwitz, and he shares that awful news. But he also writes to my great-grandfather. This is a guy who was an accountant. He was well educated. He knew 5-6 languages, including English, but he is writing in the late 1940s to my great-grandfather in the United States, and he says, we have he makes 2 magical requests, you could say, in his letters. One is he says that some property that they had given, this will be interesting, they were given to Muslim Albanian neighbors because Muslims were considered trustworthy, whereas Christians were not. But we cannot find the family now after the war. Maybe they were displaced, don't know where the stuff is. Can you help us find it? Can you help us find it? That's request number 1. Request number 2 is, my wife is very ill. Can you make her a kameah with the hope that she will be restored to health? And a subsequent letter says that we received the kameah, she's doing better, thank you very much. The next letter, she died. But okay, so it had some effect. So when I went to Salonika, when I went to Greece for the first time, I found the family. And I said to the family, do you happen to have a kameah that you may have received at some point? And they knew what the term was. They knew what the kameah was. Of course we have the kameah. When, this is the daughter speaking, when my mother was ill, my father wrote to America and the rabbi sent the kameah. And I said, well, that was my great-grandfather. They couldn't believe it. And I said, well, do you have the kameah? I said, of course we have the kameah. It was now the granddaughter used the kameah as her good luck charm when she went on a piano recital for her piano recitals. It was a pretty amazing thing. So it continues to have its echoes and purposes into the 21st century.
That's amazing. I'm sorry, can I ask you to circle back to kind of part of the start of the story? They gave them to Muslims. What was the relationship there?
I think they were just neighbors. They were Albanian, specifically Albanian, Arnutes, Albanian Muslims. Yeah, that's right.
That's amazing.
I love that term, chachamikos. That is so cute. I'm imagining little smicha as well to go along with it, little ordination, and that I think more roles of leadership. It sounds like it's you can't get a degree in that at rabbi school today, and I think you should not have to get a degree. I don't know, whatever. Many paths to religious sacred leadership is what I'm talking about.
I want to be considerate because I know Dr. Nar has to leave early. Not early. Okay, on time. I'm sorry. Here in my Jewish learning, on time is early. Okay, we usually go like 5 or 10 minutes over. I'm sorry. But I just want to say thank you both so much for joining and starting this conversation with us. I think so many Jews, especially those who joined us from an audience today, are really interested in the reclamation and remembering and reviving of these little traditions and this little religion. And so we're all so happy that you could be here today and that you could share with us and answer a lot of the questions that were in the chat. Do you have any closing remarks?
Thank you so much, everyone who's here, for spending your afternoon learning with us. There's obviously so much more to learn and talk about. I finally put together a website, which is talmudmagic.com. If you'd like to reach out, I'm happy to come to your community and speak as well. And I have a few theater productions on the aspect of Jewish magic and superstition and supernaturalism too, that I'd love to share with you all. Thank you so much for chatting with me, Doctor.
Yeah, thank you. This was great. I would only say, salud y beracha que tengamos. Health and blessings may we all have. And the response to that is?
Amen.
Amen. Thank you all so much for watching and joining us and being part of the conversation. There will be a recording posted later and I will send it out in a follow-up email. Thank you all so much and have a wonderful afternoon.
Bye.
Bye.